Hello, Flute friends. My name is Dr. Eiben. I teach at the University of Texas in Permian Basin in Odessa, and I'm also an associate band director at Permian High School. I've been teaching flute for, probably about 10, 15 years, and I just started in this area about 7 years ago. So my hope today is to help you through the all-region process in Texas. So I know many of you are at the point now where you're getting started, hopefully getting started looking at the etudes. And so my hope today is to give you some help, some tricks and tips on how to go about preparing these etudes and how to just go about practicing and what you need to do to practice along with those etudes. So this video is in several parts. It first starts out with some flexibility exercises, some technique exercises that deal with the key signature of the etude, and then I dive into some specific measures that are probably going to give you some trouble. And so what I've done is I've divided up that video so that you can refer to different parts of it. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in and get started. Okay, so what I've done here is I've put together a practice guide for every single etude. So for each etude, I'm going to have a separate video as far as practice guide. So this one, we're going to deal with the first etude, etude number 1, which is F major. The very first exercise that I have for you today is going to be the flexibility exercise. So as you can see here, it's a flexibility exercise that gets more and more challenging as it goes along. You have pretty big leaps, some of them up to 2 octaves, and you have to get to where you can do them quickly and smoothly while still playing in tune with a beautiful sound. Just in general, some important things to think about before you do a flexibility exercise. Number 1 is you have to stay relaxed. You're going to want to try to move your corners around a lot, even pull them back away from the head joint, and that causes a lot of tension. It causes your lips to stretch, and that limits your flexibility. So you want to try to do this with as minimal movement as possible while staying very relaxed. As you can see on the top of the exercise, I have several different tempos up here. I'm going to go ahead and start at the minimum tempo of 60. So you want to practice this slowly at first and then get to where you can gradually speed up the tempo. But slowly at first is better so that you can get the idea of how you need to move and tuning and a good tone and all of that, and just doing this as smoothly as possible. Our next section of our help packet is going to deal with articulation and technique. So what I've done is I've taken these 4 articulations that you're going to see very often throughout the etude. And the idea is you're going to take these 4 right here, and as you go through these different technique exercises, you're going to want to practice these different articulations. So it could be that you even have a little schedule for this if you would like, or just knowing that, okay, today I'm going to play the full range scale F major and I'm going to play with articulation A. But then I'm going to do the thirds and I'm going to play articulation B. So just an example, you can do everything on Monday with articulation A, or you can mix and match. That's the beauty of it. It's however you want to do it. But be sure that you practice these different articulations, because it's going to help you get really good at it for when you have to apply it in your etude. Okay, so the first thing I have here is the full range scale for F major. Full range meaning that normally when you see a scale, notice that it's usually only 2 octaves. Well, I think that it's much more beneficial to do a full range scale, meaning you're going all the way up to B flat and all the way down to C, because honestly, that's where all the harder fingerings are. And so you're going to want to practice those as well. All right, so this starts out at quarter note equals 40, and then what I've done here is I've listed off different tempos so that hopefully you can, once you get really good at 40 and you bump it up to 45, just go ahead and cross through 40, and that's going to show yourself your progress. It's sort of like a practice journal right there. So use that however you will, but I think that's hopefully going to be very useful for you. It's okay to start out slow, and it's okay to just lose patience sometimes, but you know, it's going to be fine. Everybody has to do this slowly at first. And so if you feel like you're stuck on 40 for a while, it's okay. No worries. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to play this for you at 40, and then I'll try to play it for you at a little bit faster tempo. Again, it might be a little while before you can get to that tempo or faster, and that's okay. Just remember to continue to be patient with yourself. Okay, so this next section is, it's the same key. We're still dealing with F major. These are all technical exercises in F major to get us prepared for that key signature that we're going to have to deal with in the Etude. And this is scale in thirds. And what that means is each one of these notes is a third apart. So F, G, A, that's 3 notes apart. And so that's where you get the thirds from. Okay, so same thing here. Let's go ahead. We didn't do articulation C yet, so let's try to do articulation C. And again, I'll do it at a slower tempo so that you can play along with me. Okay, the next section of our technical F major exercises is going to deal with F arpeggio patterns. So what this is doing is it's taking you through all the different variations of the key of F. So augmented, major, minor. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with this first one. This deals with augmented and major. I'm going to go ahead and use articulation A. And again, that was slurring 2 notes at a time. I'll show it to you real quick. So this is articulation A right here, tia, tia. I'm going to go ahead and do the first line like that, okay? And then the second one, I'll use articulation B, and then I'll go to articulation C. So here's the first line, and I'm doing this at our first practice tempo, which is quarter note equals 40. Okay, here's line 2, and I'm going to use articulation B, and I'll show that to you again real quick. So slur 3, tongue 1, tia, ta, tia, ta, ta, like that. Okay, and we're going to do the second line starting on minor. So this one has a strange note in it. It's a C flat. So if you know your chromatic scale really well, you know that a flat lowers a note by a half step. So if you're just fingering a C, you know that a half step down from C is B natural. So C flat is fingered just like B natural. Okay, and here's our third line. This does our major 7 and diminished 7 arpeggio patterns. And I'm going to use articulation C, which is tongue 1, slur 3, ta, 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 ta. Okay, and we're going to do this third line still at quarter note equals 40. And then the last technical exercise that I have on here is the chromatic scale. It's just a 2-octave chromatic scale starting on F. So again, I tried to keep all the technical exercises framed around the key of F. And so again, I'm going to do different articulations on this. I don't think I've done articulation D yet, so I'm going to do articulation D. So what articulation D is, it's actually the same as articulation A, it's just displaced by 1 note. So you'll tongue the first note only, and then the rest will slur groups of 2, but it will not happen on the beat like it did with articulation A. And so you will see that same articulation in the F major etude, and it can be kind of confusing if you don't practice it. And so I'm going to do articulation D on the chromatic scale, and again, I'll start at quarter note equals 40. So if you couldn't see my fingers, which I don't think you could on the camera, the best fingering to use for your A sharp or B flat fingering for chromatic is always lever B flat. Okay, and the reason is because number one, you can't slide your thumb back and forth. That's a big no-no. That's like the breaking the first commandment of flute playing, so you don't want to do that. And the second fingering that a lot of people like to use is 1 and 1. It's called 1 and 1 because it's dealing with the first finger on both hands. The reason I don't recommend this fingering for chromatic is because you're having to do this flip-flop between A and B as you play, and that can cause some uncleanliness. It can cause some just little blips, and it just doesn't sound very clean. And so what's great about lever is that it actually does not affect the A at all. And so I always recommend to my students that they put the lever down early when they're going up the chromatic scale. So I'll have them sometimes put it down as early as G sharp or A. That way it's already in place, and when they go to B, all they have to do, or all you would have to do, is lift that second finger instead of having to do a flip-flop seesaw motion that causes additional blips. So always lever for the chromatic scale. So basically anything that I thought that was fairly straightforward that didn't really require a lot of explanation, I left out. But I picked up on all those really tricky measures where I felt like I could offer some advice as far as alternate fingerings or some help with rhythm or anything like that. So that's what I did today. The very first group of measures we're going to look at is measures 3 and measure 4. So this can be tricky for a number of reasons because we do have some chromatic motion, we have some B naturals in there, and so we have to make decisions about which fingering to use for B flat, and we have some other alternate fingerings here. So there's quite a bit of accidentals, but again, being patient and practicing slowly and in small groups and small bites is going to help you learn this stuff. So if you just try to just play it through over and over in big chunks, it's not really going to be a beneficial way to practice, and you're going to find that you're going to struggle with it for a long time. So be patient with yourself. Practice one measure at a time, one beat at a time. There is no shame in that. And I promise you're going to end up learning it faster if you practice in a smart way like that. So we're only going to deal, like I said, with measures 3 and 4. And we're not going to go very fast right now, so I would recommend maybe starting about quarter note equals 60 and have your 8th note subdivision on so that you can line up your 8th notes and your 16th notes as far as the rhythm. So let's take a look at this first measure here, measure 3. What I did here was at the very beginning, I have you taking your pinky off of the G, okay? And the reason you're going to do that, take your pinky off and then you can place it back down on C so that you won't have to do a pinky slide right there. And then you see that it says slide to THN, and that's my little abbreviation for thumb natural. You're going to have to now move your thumb over to the natural side because you do have this B natural coming up. And then right here, I recommend the lever fingering for the same reason that I recommended the lever fingering for the chromatic scale, is that you can actually put it down early. Now I have the arrow right here on the B flat, but I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to recommend to my students that they put it down on that A. They put it down early, so it's already down. They don't have to worry about it, and then they can just keep going. Now the lever does need to come back up pretty quick on G because you're going to need this finger for the following F. Okay, so let's just only do that measure. We're going to do measure 3 only. So you can see right here that I wrote this little hint Keep mouth open wide to avoid cracks. So the notes that you're going to most likely want to crack on are going to be the notes in the middle register, meaning this F right here that has the staccato markings on it, and then the E flat in the following measure. So many people are going to try to aim their air too high or blow too hard. And what a crack is when you get the note above the F to speak instead of the F. And so you end up overblowing to get a harmonic. So don't blow too hard, tongue that note lightly, and then keep the mouth open and the tongue low in order to avoid that cracking sound. And then you'll get a really good vibrant tone on those Fs. Okay, so on the next measure, measure 4, you're going to still be on the natural side with your thumb. And then you notice here I have an arrow over the D, and it says THB is what it looks like, and that's an abbreviation for thumb flat. So flat on, or thumb on the flat side. So I'm moving that back over because I have 2 following B flats, and I no longer have a B natural, so I don't need to bother with that lever fingering anymore, and it's much easier for the technique to use just the thumb fingering, so you don't have to worry about the right hand at all. Okay, so let's play measure 4. Even though these notes have a staccato marking over them, notice that I'm not trying to play them too short. Staccato doesn't mean short anyway. Staccato actually is referring to separation. So you're putting space between one note and the note following, but you're not actually making the length of those notes so short that you don't get a really good tone. So not too short on those staccatos, and that's also going to help with the tone quality and avoiding those cracks. The next 2 measures that I thought would be worth mentioning and diving into was measures 7 and 8. It's mostly because of this symbol right here. And what that is, it looks like a little squiggly line or almost like a trill. This is actually referred to as a mordant. Okay, so a mordant is a type of ornament, or an ornament meaning like a trill or a grace note. It's like an extra icing on top of the cake. It's a type of ornament that implies to play a single quick alternation between the note that is written and the note above. So very similar to a trill, except only one wiggle. So what I did on the second line is I wrote it out. So the very first line, I've taken out all the mordants and I'm only just going to play the notes on the page. Okay, I'm still on my same tempo of quarter note equals 60. So once you get really good at that, then you can get to where you're adding in the mordants, okay? So we're gonna go to this next part, and I'm actually gonna go a little bit slower so that we can dive into this again together, okay? And I would recommend also, if you're having trouble with this technique, just continue to break it down into even smaller parts. You don't have to practice all 2 measures together at a time. Just practice little parts of it. So these triplets might look a little bit crazy just with the number of lines. Those are actually 30-second notes. But I just wrote, what I did was I simply took the mordant symbol and I wrote it out. And so this is what you would actually see if the symbol was written out as far as a rhythm and as far as notes. So this triplet is the same amount of time as a 16th note or 1/4 of a beat. Okay, our next group of problem measures is going to be measures 12 and measure 13. So just like 7 and 8, I highly recommend that you take away all the extra stuff, all the extra frills as far as any kind of mordants, trills, or anything like that, and just deal with the notes that are in front of you. Also notice that you have these on the downbeats, you have these tenuto markings. So a tenuto marking is actually a sort of articulation, but it's also sort of like an accent. So these notes are going to be heavier and you're going to want to lean on them. And again, these staccato notes, they do not need to be super short. Make sure that you're still getting a full tone and resonance and tongue them lightly. There's my thumb natural marking again. You're going to have your thumb on the natural side for this section, and this is a great opportunity for you to switch over since your thumb comes up on C sharp, and when you put it back down on A, it should go back on the natural side. The measures before measure 12 and 13, you're going to be on the flat side, so that's why I put that in to change that over. You'll use the natural side for these full 2 measures. And then when you get to measure 13, you're again going to use lever. And then I even wrote you a note, lever down early, comes back up on B natural because this is a little chromatic figure right here. Okay, so let's play these 2 measures together. Measure 14 is another problem measure, mostly because of the rhythm and a little bit because of the technique. So in this first group of notes, I recommend using the first trill key when you go from C to D. That way you don't have to, C to D is kind of a crazy finger combination because you're having to move so many fingers. All right, so some other concerns about this measure, again, is the rhythm. And so notice here we have 4 32nd notes, and then we have 2 16th notes. So what I've done here, these down and up arrows are there to indicate the downbeats and the upbeats. So if you turn your metronome on, be sure that you're using an 8th note subdivision so that you can feel where the downbeat and where the upbeat is, and then just simply line this up. So you're going to have 4 notes on the downbeat, 2 on the upbeat. And sometimes I just sit down with my metronome and I sort of think that out. So da 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 da. The next group of measures that I want to talk about is measures 21 to 22. The reason I want to talk to you about these measures is because, again, it deals with this thing that I talk about all the time. It has trills and it also has dotted rhythms and craziness. So if you're not careful, all of that ornamentation and the extra trills and frills and icing on top of the cake, that can affect the way you play the rhythm. So in my highly personal opinion, I think that it is so important for you to practice the rhythm first and then add the trills later. So if you notice here in this very first line, line A, and my little letters are cut off on the side so that you can see the notes nice and big. On line A, I just simply have you articulating the subdivision. So what this is a dotted 8th note, and inside the dotted 8th note is 3/16. So I have you literally articulating the subdivision on the first line to get used to the rhythm. Then I have you putting the rhythm all together as if it's written, but still no trills, just so you can be sure you place this note correctly. It's going to be those 16th notes that are after the dotted 8ths. And then once you feel really comfortable with the rhythm, then go ahead and add in those trills. And I did give you the different trill fingerings for that. Okay, so first let's just play line A. And again, it simply just deals with the tongued subdivision. I'm still at quarter note equals 40. I'm gonna go ahead and put on my 16th note subdivision for these lines. So be sure you practice that a few times before you go to line B. And again, it's just so that you can get used to that dotted rhythm. Okay, and then on to line C. So now that we're really comfortable with the rhythm, we can add those trills without distorting the rhythm at all. So let's play this third line together. Okay, and then our last tricky section in this etude is actually the very end of the etude, measures 25 and 26. If you remember back in the flexibility exercise, I was talking about how this etude has its challenges because of some of the huge leaps that you have to deal with. So if you've been practicing that flexibility exercise every day, hopefully, then this is going to get easier and easier for you. But anytime you have anything like this, the name of the game is to practice it slowly and to stay relaxed. Be sure you're not doing a lot of movement with the corners, especially with the corners going backwards. You want the corners to stay in a more neutral position where you're not pulling and stretching your lips, especially as we go lower. We tend to stretch, so don't let that happen. So as I'm playing higher, if you notice, I am pouting out the bottom lip more. I look really funny, but you want to see that wet, shiny inside part of the lip. You want to see a lot of that as you're playing higher, because what that means is you're pushing the bottom lip forward, and that pushes the air more across the hole. So you really do want to see a lot of that stuff, and that's good to see that, even though it's a little icky and weird. Okay, and so this next measure 26, it starts with this high E. The reason I included this is a little bit because of the technique and a little bit because of the rhythm. So you notice I did give you some help arrows here to show you where the downbeats and upbeats are. So important to have your metronome on eighth note subdivision so that you're able to easily line that up, okay? So, and what I did here was, it looks like this run is just kind of a bunch of notes, and it just looks kind of crazy. So what I did was I showed you that it's actually a group of 10 notes. So you want to think of 5 being on the downbeat and 5 being on the upbeat. And that's all you have to do with that, and it is just simply an F major scale. So if you've been practicing those technical exercises in the key of F, that should be no problem for you at all, okay? So we're going to play measure 26 together. Again, I'm at quarter note equals 40 with my eighth note subdivision. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you found this information to be helpful. So be sure to check out my other videos. I do have 2 other videos that are dealing with the other etudes. So there should be a video for performance for each etude, and then a help packet video for each etude. Also see the comment below, and you will find a link to the PDF of this help packet. Feel free to print it out, and you can practice with it at home. I'm also leaving my email there. Again, my name is Dr. Lyndsay Eiben. Feel free to email me with any questions, and we'll talk to you soon. Happy practicing.